won't be out in the U.S. for another 6 months or so. The first edition of the book is in French, is the translation. Christian Bourgois and Dominique have been so good to me and appreciative of the work, and the publisher is so special. My relationship with her is really unique, and she's been with me since the first novel and very supportive all along. Well, I had been working on another novel that wasn't moving fast or very well, and I really did. I fell asleep. I woke up with the first line of the novel, "Something has followed us home from Russia," and the kind of desperation to write that my protagonist, who's a poet with writer's block, feels, I felt about that first line. I have to write this. I have to write this down. And I grabbed a notebook and I wrote the first couple of pages longhand and just really woke up with the whole idea in my head. And I wrote it very quickly. And I just knew from the beginning that I wanted it to be like a one-act play, one stage, one day, one set of conflicts. And I don't know, it just was born all at once. So, and all having to do kind of with the idea of a desperation to write it, which the protagonist feels. So she and I were kind of together, trying to put this story onto the page really quickly. I think about Kafka a lot. I love Kafka. Now, Kafka was one of my, first loves in college as a writer, and I love his, semi-psychological, supernatural, surreal plots. So, now that you mention it, I do think that's there, but it wasn't consciously there all the time. I had the poem in mind all along. I can't say that it exactly inspired me. But I knew that was the title, and of course, it's a famous line from the Stevens poem, "One Must Have a Mind of Winter." That informed the whole novel. So I can't exactly trace it back, but again, I woke up knowing that it was going to be titled "Mind of Winter," and that it had to do with the poem and with the with what I interpret anyway as Wallace Stevens saying, in order to see this terror, this nothingness, you have to inside of yourself. And that was all along the kind of primordial blizzard out of which I was working. I just think they're so full of possibility for metaphor and allegory and mythology that, well, Mind of Winter is not just does not just have to do with the weather. It has to do with psychology and the relationship between the psychology and the natural world. And as a writer, that's where I'm working, is in a closed place, and also that's where I find my dramas in the domestic situation. And so I'm not a writer of the battlefield or cross-continental. I think that there's the potential drama and also the potential metaphor in those moments, Valentine's Day or Christmas Day, and also just potential to make something mythic, to heighten the drama of a situation by adding to it all the cultural baggage and associations that come with a particular time of year, or also Christmas Day having to do with motherhood and maternity and birth seemed, again, I mean, it's not directly allegorical, but I think just all the associations with that really played into, for me, maybe not even consciously as I was writing, but subconsciously with what the themes and the concerns of the novel would be. I am really interested in what's underneath the surface of things. Also, this is the kind of thing I don't think about myself when I write, but when people ask me questions, I think that if all my writing has had some theme in common, it is what people hide from themselves, and that they're in a quest to discover, what it is that they don't understand, why they have been behaving the way they have been, or how the past influences them. So that goes hand in hand with the idea of an entire, culture or town or entire family hiding the truth from themselves, and an individual, hiding the truth, and that the plot would then be the discovery of the individual of what it is that she didn't realize. I think that I first understood this when I was teaching a class, and it was a literature class, and that I had chosen certain pieces to teach to the class, and I realized, everything I chose had the same theme, because it was Oedipus, King Lear, Ibsen's A Doll's House, and something else now that I can't remember. And everything, I realized the theme of all of them, it was Freudian, was that, there's something I don't know about myself, that this plot is the trajectory for discovering. And then at some point when someone asked me such a question, I thought, that's what it is. I'm, always somebody's figuring out, this is what I don't know. She has tried to avoid fate, she's tried to deny death in a way, tried to deny mortality or bad luck or history by, refusing it, and that isn't an option. I'm not sure that when I'm writing that this is always clear to me, but I think in my personal philosophy, I don't believe in fate or destiny except in a psychological way. I do think that people, I guess I am a Freudian in that way. I think people follow, unless they are able to change, that they follow a kind of script that they're only half aware of, that has to do with the subconscious and the unconscious. I do think that that's the case in this novel, and maybe if you looked at all of my stuff, you would say, that's her take on things. That was definitely on my mind, was the mother-child relationship and the experience of motherhood, and the feeling of, terror for one's child as well. At least in my experience, the sense that one can never do it precisely right, and feelings of of guilt and the haunting of that, and also the unbearable idea that you want to protect your child and you can't. That on certain levels you're not able to do that. That was certainly one of the impulses for the novel. I find it a very scary song, full of ominous warnings. The bad thing, the hard rain that's going to fall that we don't know what it will be, but something we don't expect and something that we aren't prepared for is going to happen. And in Tony Hoagland's poem, he writes about hearing Bob Dylan's song. There's no, we can deny anything. And so again, for me, those two things were important from the very beginning. I knew what her ringtone would be, and I knew that she would be inspired by having read that poem. Well, I never really think about, that I'm trying to play with the reader, because when I'm writing, I'm not even really thinking about the reader. I'm myself figuring out what's going to happen in the story from one page to the next. But I don't know, maybe my style would be particularly suited to this sort of, slow revelation, because I so like to work with details and metaphor and symbols, and so I'm pretty associative, so one detail will lead me into the next detail. I had a friend who has been to orphanages in Siberia to adopt a child, so I have her stories, and then I did a lot of reading and internet research, but I haven't been. I would want it to the reader, and for me, I would say that the experience felt really real as I was writing it. For whatever reason, I was able, and I think maybe by focusing on minute details, to really come to feel that I was there in the process of writing about it. And I think in a way that's exactly the experience of reading something, which is similar to the experience of writing it, is, being able to take words and fully experience them in your mind. Sometimes I have dreams I wake up from that seem as vivid and real to me as things I've actually experienced in my life. And why is that? It's just the power of the imagination. So sometimes I think, when one is writing, as well as possible, you just flip that switch and you are there, like in a dream, or in the way that you experience something when you read it that you haven't experienced. When I'm writing, I don't think very much about the reader. It's all about me. It's just something, I suppose, myself facing something, or forcing myself to face something, or following that path again of discovery through the process of an unfolding plot or a character developing. So in a way, I'm the reader as I'm writing, because no, I don't have a theory or an idea that's specific about what I'm attempting to do. And I think, I'm trying to write the kind of book I would want to read. I think that's a really interesting question, and something that I think about, especially when I'm writing poetry, or when I'm deeply into a novel. Just that idea of, I find very inspiring. What do I almost know? What am I almost aware of? And because that means that it's something that's hidden that I have to work to discover, but there's some potential to discover it there. So I think whether it's a character or in one's own psychological life, that's where a lot of the power of discovery, self-discovery, or thinking about the world comes from. I think just as human beings, we do have to be going around all the time thinking, what is this? Where are we going after this? Where did we come from? And there's just always a sense that you could almost know. I know some people know, they're just convinced of things, but I think a lot of us think we could almost figure it out, but also that sense that, well, we'll really have to work at some level that we're not at yet in order to discover that. And for me, when the writing's going really well, that's where I'm at, where I could almost figure this out. And for me, this idea that if you are denying reality, not only can't you write a poem, you can't read poetry. That poetry is about the deep psychological stuff that has to be faced in order for poetry to exist. That was with me from the very beginning too. The idea of, you know, you can't be existing in that kind of sterility or the kind of self-protection that she wants to be living in and have a relationship with poetry. Perhaps, I hadn't thought about that either, but I think, you know, as somebody who writes poetry and has a child and a busy domestic life, that was, I understood her experience, the desire to write and the 10 million things that compete with the space and the, you know, and not only the space and the time to do that, but also a kind of ruthlessness that one has to have about mortality, about the nature of the universe, about human life, and that's the kinds of things that you have to face if you're going to, you know, converse with or live alongside poetry. That it's about truth, and it's hard to be a mother and face some truths. Well, again, that's something that I don't consciously decide to do. I think with this novel, I wanted it to be, to have more of the shape of a poem, you know, the brevity of the time period, how structured it is. I think in that way I did, and because she's a poet, I had the form of a poem in mind. For me, the genre of poetry and the genre of fiction, they're very different. So a lot of writers are working in hybrid forms now, and I write prose poems sometimes, but for me that's really just another form of poetry. So no, I'm not necessarily trying to blur genre boundaries. The detective novel, I like that idea that it's, you know, could be psychological or it could be, you know, that it has that element of suspense to it. But for me, that's just, I just write that because that's the kind of thing I like to read. I think that question opening the novel, that's the question that the novel is all about answering, which only the protagonist can do for us. Well, what followed them home from Russia? What followed them home from Russia? What is it that she's just on the cusp of understanding, and how is she gonna get there? So that is a little like, you know, the plot of the form of a detective novel. I think so, yeah. I think so as well. I think that they're, maybe less blatantly than a poem, because there are so many other things going on in a novel, character development and scene and plot and dialogue, and so that a poem is like a distilled version of a novel, that it's all about, you know, using words or using writing, using the subconscious as a way to answer a question, whereas the novel does it more explicitly.